Hi, my name is Danny Guillory. I'm a Senior Program Manager on the Customer Experience and Pursuit team. I'm here with my colleague.
Hi, my name's Macca and I'm also on the Customer Experience Customer Pursuit team working with Microsoft Intune.
Today we're going to be talking to you about Autopilot and how to take advantage of it in conjunction with co-management. So Macca, tell us a little bit about Autopilot and how we can get started, what we can do. Give us a rundown.
Sure. Well, I think we'd all agree that unwrapping a new PC is particularly exciting, but we've all felt that little bit of dread when we think about how long it's going to take to get all of our settings and apps just right so that we can start being productive. Co-management is going to solve this device provisioning problem with Windows Autopilot. Whether you're looking to set up or pre-configure a Windows 10 device, a new Windows 10 device, or whether to reset, repurpose or recover existing devices, Autopilot is going to provide a simplified experience both for the IT pro and the end user as well. Autopilot's also going to reduce the time, resources and complexity associated with deploying, managing and even retiring and recycling new devices. And while all that's going on, the experience for your end users is streamlined and easy right out of the box.
Cool. So what I'm hearing is that I can actually have my vendors deploy or mail devices to my end users and they can get up and running functional without ever touching my environment.
Absolutely. Windows Autopilot isn't just going to support that scenario. In fact, it supports multiple scenarios, all of which are maximised with co-management. So your end users can drive their own new device deployments, just as you say, either into Azure Active Directory and automatically enrolled into Intune, or even into an on-premises Active Directory in a hybrid Azure AD join. Additionally, we can set up self-deploying new device deployments into Azure Active Directory, for example, shared devices and kiosks. And with Windows Autopilot for existing devices, you can use Config Manager to migrate an existing device from Windows 7 and on-prem Active Directory into Windows 10 and Azure Active Directory.
All right, great, man. That's a lot of information that we need to unpack there. One thing I'm actually interested in is, can we actually deploy the SCCM agent from Intune?
Absolutely we can, yeah. So in the example of a brand new device that's just enrolling into Azure Active Directory and then automatically enrolling into Intune and then needing to pull down the Config Manager client, we can absolutely do that. Now you can see on my screen here that I'm currently sitting in the Intune console under device enrollment and Windows enrollment. And the first thing we're going to need to do to get to this particular place is to create a deployment profile. Now we can see in our deployment profiles here we have a hybrid joined device. And our hybrid join device has a property here which allows us to choose how we're going to join Azure AD. And in this case, we can see that we're doing a hybrid Azure AD join environment. The next thing we're going to need to do is make sure that we tell Intune exactly what on-prem domain it needs to join. And then once we've joined that on-prem domain, we can then start pulling down that Config Manager client. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go into our device configuration, into our profile section and create ourselves a domain join profile. And if I just scroll across here, you'll see that we have the ability to firstly choose how we're going to name that computer when it gets joined to the on-premises domain after being joined to Azure Active Directory.
So I can effectively impose my own naming scheme or my company naming scheme, right?
Absolutely can, and then we'll just pad that out to the 15 characters with whatever other stuff we need to put in.
Awesome.
Additionally, we can choose which domain we're joining and even which organisational unit we're going to join. So once we've got that in place, Intune now knows which on-prem domain it's going to push this particular machine to. And the final part of the puzzle is getting the Config Manager client deployed so that we can then bring ourselves into Config Manager and get the full benefits of all of the co-management capabilities that are out there. Now the way I'll do this is simply import the SCCM setup file into Autopilot and provide a command line argument that tells the Config Manager client exactly which co-management gateway to connect to and then get joined into the configuration manager environment from there. Now one of the things that a lot of people ask is, well, how do I actually get that command line argument? What does that actually look like? So one of the things that you'll need to do is get that information from your config manager environment. So if I was just to go into my config manager environment here, you'll see under Cloud Services Co-Management that we have a policy. And if I open the properties of that particular policy, like so, you will see the information we need to provide to Intune to allow us to join that. So that's particularly important.
So I can take advantage of hardware inventory, software inventory, basically a lot of the SCCM features through Intune as well as SCCM altogether.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, that's really cool. So how do we get from Windows 7 to Windows 10?
Sure. So with Autopilot for existing devices, what we can do is we can take an existing Windows 7 device, provide all of the information that's needed for Autopilot to do its thing inside a JSON file, add that into a task sequence, and then simply advertise that task sequence down to those machines either in a required or an optional format.
Awesome. All right, well, you got something to show me?
Absolutely
I want to
do.
see this. This looks awesome.
Okay, so what you can see here on my screen is my Windows 7 device. Now what we've done in the background is we've created a task sequence. That task sequence has been assigned to this particular device as an optional task sequence, and the end user is then going to fire that off, and we'll see it go through all of the processes that are needed. Now, the magic happening here under the hood is we've taken some time to go and build a JSON file that gives that particular machine all the information it needs to kick into Autopilot and then go ahead and join our particular Intune tenant. So what we'll do is we'll hit the go button here, and you can see that basically I open up Software Center. You can see that the task sequence has been assigned here. I'm going to hit the install. Now, for all of you that are familiar with Config Manager, what you're seeing here is stuff that you've been doing for years. As you can see, it's connected to the task sequence, it's downloaded the task sequence, and now it's starting to run all of the different steps inside that task sequence that are needed to get this machine up and running. What we're going to do now is we're pulling down a boot image, we're going to reboot into Windows PE, and as part of that entire scenario, we're then going to pull the WIM image for Windows 10, and we're also going to pull a JSON file that Windows 10 will use to kick off the Autopilot process. Obviously, the information inside Windows Intune has already been put in there, as you can see in the demo, allowing us to do the appropriate hybrid Azure AD join. So the machine reboots, and I'm sure, Danny, you've seen this a few times.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the UBI screens and getting into Windows PE.
Absolutely, and you can see we're in Windows PE now, and we're going through the steps in this task sequence. So partitioning the disk. Now, of course, we're going to pull down the Windows 10 WIM, or however you've configured that particular WIM. This is just a bog standard Windows 10 WIM. We're applying the appropriate version of Windows 10 from that particular WIM, and now we'll go ahead and pull down the JSON file. On the reboot, we're now going to utilize the information in that JSON file to do what we need to do with Autopilot.
Now, you've mentioned JSON a few times. Do I need to be like a JSON whiz, or how easy or complex is that to get to set up?
Absolutely don't need to be a whiz. So if you go to docs.microsoft.com and look up the information on how to do the hybrid join and Windows Autopilot for existing devices, we give you all of the instructions you need to extract that particular piece of information and then get that into the JSON file into the task sequence after that as well.
Awesome.
You can see here that Autopilot's kicked in. It's found our tenant. We're logging into the tenant straight away, and now it's going to go ahead and do everything else that needs to be done, get this device up and running and ready to go. As part of this entire process, what we've also done, and what we really encourage our customers to do, is set up known folder moves. So all of those pictures and document folders have automatically been redirected to OneDrive. So when the user logs in, not only do we provide the apps that the user needs, but all of their data is sitting exactly where they expect it to be. Now you can see here that we're going through that first run experience that we all know and love. And when we get to that desktop, in just a couple of moments, you'll see that we now have a beautiful Windows 10 device connected to Azure Active Directory and on-prem AD, and finally, of course, we'll also have access to all of our documents and all of our pictures as well. Here comes the final part of the process now, setting up the account, and then we're good to go.
So what does this whole process look like for just average runtime for a device? We talking 10 minutes, 20 minutes? What are we talking here?
Average runtime for a device really depends on how quickly we pull down the WIM and stuff like that, but yeah, in general, you'll see this happen in around about 20 to 30 minutes, rather than that, the old style of, an hour or more, or even a couple of days for your IT department to provision a new device. So I think this is really, really beneficial to what we're trying to do.
Now, once the process completes, I'm in Windows 10, I can really take advantage of all the features and the enormous possibilities that Microsoft's built into Windows 10, right?
Absolutely right.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Maka. Appreciate the information on co-management and Autopilot. Check out the rest of the series, Co-Management Blast Off.